thank you everybody for being here today, and thank you Junoon and your entire team. Um, so to start with, like she said, I'm going to talk to you about my journey and journey as an artist, and it's Mumbai local, so I must start by saying that I've lived in Mumbai almost my entire life, and I love Bombay, but you will see in my work, and it's surprising that I do the kind of work which as if uh, belongs to, it could be anywhere, and it could be anywhere simply because I think I live in Mumbai, but I think I have this area of the mind, my imagination, which I seem to um, inhabit and really use and push and as if play around with in my work. And so my work is begins there, I would say. And some people who do know about the art I make somehow think that I make self-portraits. That's what I'm kind of known for. And it's true in a sense, but let me tell you that I make fictional self-portraits. So I am interested in the self-image. I am making paintings of myself, but they have nothing to do with the real self, as if. And it's about stories. It's about telling stories through paintings. It's kind of a fictional autobiography. What I've been, I can say what I started with. And I studied at the JJ School of Art here in Mumbai. And when I went to art school because, not because I wanted to be an artist, but I was unsure about, I was creative, but I didn't know. I collected visual trash, I would say, like advertisements and beautiful pictures, and I didn't really know about high art as such, and I like to draw, but that was about it. No real reason to be an artist. But after 2 years of studying at the HR College of Commerce, I came to JJ and I studied art, and in the first 3 months I knew that I wanted to be a painter, and I loved this world that I was introduced to. And along with it came the world of cinema. I started seeing films. I saw Satyajit Ray, I saw Bergman, I joined the film club, and literature, going to poetry readings. And all this, you know, it was, I found food for my soul, and that's how my journey started. So I'll just start with the images and then we'll take it from there. My plan is to just show you images, talk along with it, and after I'm done, we can chat and you can ask questions if you have any. So this is Monday morning, and starting with a very, keeping a nocturnal diary. So I would stand in front of a mirror and draw myself with a 4B or 6B pencil. That's how it started, you know, making a sketchbook. And so when I say started, I mean earlier what I did in art school, which was very encouraging for abstraction. I did abstract collages. So all 5 years at JJ, I did abstract collages, and then simultaneously, I had this habit of drawing myself in the mirror every night, and this nocturnal diary is what finally came to these first 30 works that I showed, that I started my my artistic career with, and it was watercolor. Now I can say that I came to watercolor also as I just stumbled upon it. I had a box of imported watercolors which my father got me, and so I didn't want to waste it. Winsor and Newton, you know, you don't waste expensive colors. So I just experimented with it, and I enjoyed it so much. It was, I think it went with my nature of, I like the beautiful transparency, the way it layers, and also there's a great tension about watercolor. It's like when you make a mark, you know, it doesn't go. So it's a very tense medium. It appears easy and beautiful, but at the same time there is something about watercolor which gives it a great tension, and I enjoyed it a lot. So Monday morning, and simultaneously the pose here, it's like a no actor, and as I was telling you, all the new things that I learned, I was also exposed to the Japanese ukiyo-e prints at that time, and that's where this posture comes from. Paper eater. So there is a series of paintings of a girl in a room, but this girl in a room was not. She wasn't. She wasn't just a girl in the room. Every time I painted her, she was an artist in the room. So it okay. So I was painting this solitary female figure, but I was not interested in her being a woman. I was not interested in her uh, being alone. Really, what really interested me was that uh, this is an artist, an anxious artist in a room, which I was too at that time, and still am. But it had to do with creativity. So I think constantly I'm making art about art making. That's how it was. It began. So this is the conversation with the self, and uh, it's okay. So it's a girl in the room who is actually an artist in the room, and everything that happens around her is has to do with the self questioning, the doubts, the arguments with herself. That's how the work develops. And also, I felt that I was kind of exploring my own vulnerability. So it's called fear of fog. All of us, we've heard about all kinds of phobias. So there's also one which has to do with fog, and I'm talking about the fog inside. Next, this is it's called entering the ring, and I found that when I say I talk about the difficulties of creativity, I mean that in spite of wanting to be a painter, in spite of wanting to create, I constantly found myself um as if weighted down by this whole act of entering the white of the paper and to begin a work. And so it was almost like a ritual which had to be kind of overcome. And the sumos in Japan, they actually have this whole very precise ritual by which they enter the ring before they start a fight, or whatever it's called. So I use that the figure of the sumo, and I find I enjoy costume, and I like the idea of choreographing my tension. Also borrowing stories from elsewhere to talk about this the difficulty of creativity. This is the Greek myth of the birth of Athena when she came out of Apollo's head. So I always associate the idea of tearing out images from my head, like it's a violent process. So this seemed to kind of depict that. So it's about painting, and at the same time it's about Athena. So I think I've had quite a singular, linear kind of journey, and as if constantly I'm talking about the same thing and finding different ways of doing it. And also, let me just share that this is a watercolor. It's 6 feet across, and it's traditionally it's a medium that you work in on a small size, but I've enjoyed the whole, the transparency, the stain making, and uh, I feel very comfortable now with this medium. Next, um, this image comes from a film called The Passion of Joan of Arc, directed by a German, Karl Dreyer, and It's a beautiful film, and I was very moved by it. And on and off, I feel I have taken from cinema, I have taken directly sometimes from film stills, like this one here. And sometimes I think I just borrow from the emotional theater of directors like Bergman. And like, um, there's a certain simplicity about the frame, and also I guess it's about empathy and feeling so much that I wanted to paint it, just render it as if again. This painting is called The Triumph of the Erasers, and looking at Japanese painting and the miniatures and this idea of costume, and at the same time, it goes along with this idea of uh, the diffident artist, and I'm not sure what I want to do. I'm not, I have nothing to paint. So it's kind of celebrating that. Next. The watercolorist. Um, I would say that this is a true self, and this is what I do primarily. I work with paper, I work with watercolor, and the costume is borrowed from the Renaissance, the sibyls. Those minor characters which are always located in the small niches of the big European churches. Next. So constantly it is about the mind and what goes on inside. Next. Yeah. Um, I guess they're just flying thoughts or something. If you have to spell it out, I'd rather not. But anyway, it's called Phantoms. Next. Rain. It's about, actually, there came a point when um, there's a certain beauty about watercolor, and after a point I started kind of almost rejecting it or resisting it, I would say. And that's when charcoal came into my work, and also a certain, I started embracing a certain opacity. It was partly, it was formal, it had to do, I wanted to do away with the somehow the lyrical beauty that one associates with watercolor, and it also had to do with when I apply charcoal and then I use watercolor and then I apply charcoal, so that process of uh, backward, forward, it led me on to a certain abstraction and also a certain unpredictability, a certain uncertainty, which I think was very important for me in the process, because the content speaks about it, and the process also started including these areas of thought, which I liked very much. Uh, and charcoal, when it merges with water, it creates these black clouds, which I found extremely beautiful, and also it had a certain uh, a dark, messy feel, which which I thought was important to my content. Next. The previous image with those swords raining down on her, it had to do with um, I guess, when I use the word allegory, it seems very big and also kind of stupid. But this was some sort of a allegorical reference to difficulties which are not quite, not precisely pointed out, but at the same time, yeah. This painting is called Game, and it's taken from a film still about from the 40s, and I and she's playing billiard, and all those balls have self images. So now, after working with the self image, there came a point when I started. It's almost like it's a self mocking. It's kind of a parody of myself, and I say that, so it's a game I'm playing again and again. The self image occurs, and uh, so all these heads, all of them have the self-image. And also again, I was interested in rendering the costume, and um, that's how I came to this. Next, please. Uh, so the previous painting, like game, I firmly believe that um, all my painting itself, it is a creative game. It is all about I'm playing. I do it for my own pleasure and joy, and I hope to involve the viewer sometimes in that. But it's nothing more than that, finally, honestly. And but at the same time, it implies a certain opening out. I'm going to my viewer. I want a viewer, of course, and that opening out, it can be quite frightening. And so I've often talked about that. And this painting Pillory is, there used to be these medieval devices where, if you've done something and you're not going to be hanged for it, but you can be brought into the village square and, pilloried. And it's about being shamed and embarrassed. And so I think sometimes that as artists, we all go through this. And so it's that whole, oh my god, exposure, which, but also let me talk formally. The structure comes from, I enjoy German European medieval woodcuts a lot, so that the form of it is, it interests me, so sometimes the rendering comes from there. Next. um, so this is something which I tried, which was very different. We were in Hardwar for a while. It was a kind of a residency with Atul and Bhupen Khakkar, and in Haridwar, and then I decided to paint fakirs. So that whole idea of the fakir interested me, simply because they have these, the hair that they don't wash, the unwashed mane of that hair, which I thought was amazing. The head and the hair. That's all I wanted to paint. So I finally painted Shiva, the greatest fakir, and Shiva with his third eye, and you see Ganga, the lady coming out of his hair, and she's trying to find a way out, and she needs to come to earth. And of course she's holding a pencil, because that's what I do, and she better be, yeah. So that's a Stedler pencil, and that's Shiva and Ganga. uh, Next. And this Shiva later found its way into this commission work which I did for the Grand Hyatt Mumbai, and it was, I was asked to paint the marriage of Shiva Parvati, and it was a large scale for me. For me at that point, painting a 6 feet by 4 feet painting was the largest probably what I had done, and this was wider. It was about, I think, 16 feet or something. And so I thought that I would occupy the space by making small drawings and put them together. I thought I would do drawings on fabric, because I have always been interested in fabric and the central feel of that surface, and I thought it would be a new material, new beginning. And finally it happened that the fabric became, on a mattress. Because it was a marriage, I thought of making a double bed. And so these drawings, this fabric was stretched onto a mattress, and I made these two mattresses, one for Shiva and one for Parvati, and it seemed to work for that subject matter. And so here they are. There is Shiva, and with his entangled hair, and there is Parvati. And Parvati, she comes from a Japanese ukiyo-e print, which I was very much into looking at, and it doesn't bother me. I thought that if Shiva is Kailashpati, and so Parvati could be from Mount Fuji, or it's allowed. After all, it's a cosmic event, so geography didn't matter. And and those metal cutouts on top, they are the crazy guests at the wedding, because he had a lot of drunk demons attending Shiva. So that's that. And Now, at this point, the mattress was, it just kind of came because of the subject matter, but I found that I enjoyed it a lot. Painting with acrylic on fabric, somehow it seemed to excite me. And next, okay, this is the Parvati, Japanese Parvati. Next. Yeah. So, and that excitement, I thought that I could push it forward by painting some more mattresses or painting on fabric. It's like being primarily a painter of figures and bodies. I thought that painting on a textured fabric seemed to give the skin of my figure a new skin, so a flowered skin or a patterned skin. And I like that idea very much. It also it also kind of connected with my own my own skin condition. I had leukoderma and I have leukoderma, and so it seemed to there seemed to be something going on there which I liked, and also the painted mattress. It's like a standing bed. It's like a pregnant painting. So when it stands on a wall, for me, it became like an object by default, and it had a very somehow aggressive kind of presence, which I liked. It didn't seem to recede like many other things that I made, and I thought this was something I could explore. So that's how I continued, and also the themes that I think that I work with, which are primarily mine. It's like anxiety and insomnia and love, and I think all these things belong in a bed. So it seemed logical. I mean, at least I gave myself the permission to think it was logical. It's called, sorry, go back. It's called Cloud Hunter, and I was thinking of all of us. We have these uh, abstract needs that we go after. So it's like a cloud hunt. It's something that it's very personal. Everyone has it, and Give Patel has it too, but in a different way. He paints clouds all the time, so that's a different cloud hunt. But uh, for me, it was all about yeah, about personal, precise, no, imprecise longings. This is called forked. It's on a corrugated fabric, and it's about a circuit of not communicating. In Gujarat, they say when a child doesn't speak, they make little birds speak in their mouth, so that yeah, they learn words and speech. So it's like when two people don't talk to each other, they need to be taught again. Next, this is another mattress, the multitasking lovers. Next, this is called the path of berries, and uh, this painting, this image has to do with I love stories, and the Greek myths provide a lot of matter sometimes. The story of Penelope. She's a Greek character, and one of the things about her is that her husband Odysseus goes away for 25 years, and while he's away, she has to protect herself from suitors or whatever. So while he's away, she weaves uh, every night, and she tells people that till this cloth is complete, I will not marry, I will not remarry or whatever. And so she weaves, sorry, through the day, and every night she pulls it apart, and so this goes on. So this story, I think, interested me a lot because of this idea of weaving, and what do you call it, to pull it apart again. So when I saw this Persian bird, the white bird that you see, I saw it in a Persian miniature, and I thought that it had that quality of the quality of the white, the way I rendered it. But it had this feeling that if you just give a little tug, and the whole thing will come apart, like an old sweater or something. And I love that. And the idea of Penelope, her whole life depended on this little tug. every night amazes me, and I like that. So that reference uh, I enjoyed very much, and so this is about that. And also let me share that I think it's artists, sometimes there are all kinds of little things that might make me want to paint an image, but and then it's kind of it sometimes grows into a big emotional theater, or sometimes it's about a gesture, or it's just about a um, certain sense of mystery about an event or a body or a place or a face, and it could be that. So in spite of starting with a story and again ending with a story, the truth is that what goes on in between is, it's actually about form. It's about um, a sort of a labyrinth that one builds and navigates and enjoys very much. It's about, yeah, the joy of applying color, for instance. Next. And as I was saying, that sometimes we start paintings with stories. Some it's surprising the kind of things that inspire us. So now I go back to the title of my talk, The Color of Doubt. So it's like, in spite of, I think, painting now for more than 25 years, I honestly confess that I am a kind of a nervous type. I still feel frightened of my studio, my of that first mark and all that. And also very fortunately, I have been able to make all that my subject matter. So it's like I feel this doubt, and I feel this anxiety, and I feel this killing panic, and I have made it my content, and so it goes on. And then I read that these 19th century European hat makers, they when they made hats, they made hats with felt and used chemicals and stuff. So they would have these side effects because of using these things. So their hands would shake and their speech would stutter, and they so all these chemical. And I thought I identified so much. It's just the painter's anxiety. I felt that I feel exactly like that, and it gave me a reason to paint hats. So living in Bombay, why would anyone want to paint hats? That's why. And so I did some paintings with heads. Of course, it has to do with, it's an extension to the face, which is like it also kind of adds on uh, to the story of the portrait. Next, Jade Rider. Next. Okay, now I've come to this exhibition which I did in Baroda in 2007. It was um, it was called Throne of Frost. This was in the Baroda uh, Darbar Hall, where I mean, it's a very grand space, and I was invited to show there. But this great hall of with this high ceiling and uh, jarokhas and chandeliers, and it has no walls. So as a painter, when I came to this space, it was very frightening. And so, well, finally I made this exhibition where I decided to lay a kind of a lake of mirrors and put some paintings around it. And in my mind, it was I just needed those mirrors to reflect the ceiling and somehow bring the space together. And also these mirror shards, I think uh, it had to do with, all along all these years I've been somehow painting the self, and there's a mirror that sits in my studio which my father-in-law made for me, thinking that okay, you paint self portraits, so you need a mirror, which I don't use, but anyway. So there was this there was a connection with mirrors, and at the same time there was that when you go to a palace, there are these associations, Mughal Azam and Anarkali and um, broken mirrors. And I was also, of course, reminded of the the German poet Rilke. He said that uh, broken, maybe I'm saying it incorrect, broken souls are best represented in bits and shards. And somehow, it all went together as if that this idea of decay and I won't say death, but something about uh, a palace now, it seemed to invite this sort of solution, this sort of presentation. And also for me, it was like a meditation of on wealth, on the passing of time, and also that's next, please. So, so this was the palace, and I had to compete with all these the chandeliers and this grand ceiling and and so what I did was initially I thought that it's like when you go to meet a queen, you don't wear your jewelry. It doesn't work. It really doesn't work. So I thought that I would just do drawings, charcoal drawings, basic, very graphic, so that you can see the black and or something like that. And then being a colorist, maybe I would say I enjoy color so much. So I thought that that won't work. So then the watercolor. So how am I going to place my works in that wall-less space? So then I thought of making them stand on these stands, and they could go around. And so what do I do behind? So anyway, it finally happened that I made these mattresses for each watercolor. It was like like these courtiers wear robes, and it's very opulent. It's very they have embroidered motifs sometimes, and it's about hierarchy. It's about so I kind of I thought I almost devised it like some cavalry, some army walking in. So they are all positioned, and and there was also another important thing which I needed to do. So this was how the 30 paintings of various heights were placed around the space. Yeah. Next. I was thinking that when you place painting or watercolor on a wall, it's become a tendency, especially so. Then I was thinking a lot about it, that you pass it on and you'd rather go and read some text on the wall or the video, or it's. I think it's also maybe a natural need for the viewer to go to something which seems new. So, so these paintings were turned around. They're looking inside, and when I made it, it was all a process of struggle and this and that. But finally, when it happened, I found that it put the viewer in a performative mode. So instead of denying, it's in front of you and you just deny it, you just walk off, you don't pay it enough attention. But when it is not given to you, when it's turned away from you, I found the viewer interested. So suddenly there was a lot of peeping, and people are trying to, yeah, get into the picture and look at it. So that excited me a lot as a painter. And the motifs were embroidered. They were on different upholstery fabrics behind on a padded surface. That's right. And the drawing was it was very graphic, so that you could see the image, but at the same time, you didn't have the comfort of being close to it, and that intimacy was kind of prohibited. And I think it added to a certain tension. I think the works themselves. This is called changing skin, and I think I was exploring part wound and part jewel. That idea. I think I also must share that um a lot of my reference imagery also comes from apart from Italian painting and the Japanese ukiyo-e prints. I also look a lot at contemporary fashion. So this comes from um, Comme des Garçons exhibit that I had seen. Yeah. Next, this is called paper robe, and so like an image like this, which was just it's about the fragile. And next, so the mattress behind had this embroidered on it. So sometimes it was very direct and I would say meaningful, and sometimes go next. This one was called Victor because he looked like Victor Banerjee. Next. So Victor had this. This was the. These were the motives behind him because he needed a haircut probably. Next. This is called Love Cordon, and it's a 8 footer. So I played with heights, and it. Uh, this is called Maze of Slowness. I I like the idea of slowness very much, and um I try to celebrate it in my work. So because it was a palace, sometimes the images had to do with, like I said, jewels and also in pop culture we've taken a lot from what appears royal, but it's not. So you'll have a soap bar with a star and a crown or something. So I was also, I mean, of course, it does not concern the viewer, but those were the fun inputs that went into the work. This is called the shame of greed. Greed. It's called touching air. This is Wajid Ali. Again, the headgear is taken from a Alexander McQueen design. I mean, I feel enriched, and I'm greedy. I'm looking everywhere for things that can help me paint. Next, um, I've come to this body of work, which was it's called All Night I Shall Gallop, and this was done in a, a paper pulp and print making residency in Singapore, where at the Tyler Print Institute, and this was it was quite an amazing experience for me because having worked in paper all the time, many years, this place, this workshop actually starts with paper from the very basic, from the pulp, and while it is pulp, you can do things to it. You can add stuff. Uh, you can print on it. You can etch on it. So it's a very there's a possibility of great play, and I really enjoyed myself there. And the work that I made there is. Because the nature of a workshop is, it's relentless because you're surrounded by people, you're being watched as if, and so it was like constantly, it's not that you don't pause, you don't meditate, you are constantly in action mode. So the title All Night I Shall Gallop has to do with that. It comes from the poetry of Sylvia Plath, whom I was reading a lot at that time, and I love her poetry because I think uh, she's a wonderful craftswoman of pain. The way she crafts pain, I love that. It's not just about pain. It's not about unhappiness or sadness or whatever the biographies say. But I think it's about that fantastic structure of pain that she creates, and I'm interested in that. And for the work, as a kind of a starting point, a kind of kick off, what I did was I took phrases from Plath's poetry and used them in my work. And the wonderful thing was that when you pull out a phrase, it you know it when it came out of the poem had tragic tones, but when it on its own, you could just see the grammar of uh, a certain, one could just feel the emotional beauty of the words, and somehow I enjoyed that a lot. And also, it gave me a new way of working. So for instance, you can make holes, you can insert fabric. Uh, those were the possibilities. Next, this is the season triptych. Next, I also inserted mirrors into the paper, and so there was etching, there was screen print, there was a lot going on. Next. So this, the image on the left, as I was saying, the paper pulp it's ready to receive. And I find that when I'm in my studio and I'm painting, when I'm in front of the paper, I work with watercolor. The process is a lot like, it's like an archaeologist, so I'm constantly as if digging out things from my mind to put in there. And or the paper, while working, it throws up things, so it's like I didn't expect something, and while I'm working, I come across something which I emphasize more, and that's how paintings are created. So there's that sort of unpredictable process. But in the case of paper pulp here, it was like, it was reverse. So I was, there's the pulp, and I was kind of, um, it was like a, somehow I was burying things in them. And so there's a sari here. There are two saris which I knotted together, and it was buried into the paper pulp. And um, so you make prints and then you insert them into the wet. So it was a totally reverse process. And also, I am not technically, I'm not a happy person. I don't like to use the remote. I don't like to use the laptop. So I'm not technically very, I don't enjoy gadgets. So the idea of working with printmaking also could have been problematic. But from the very beginning, I warmed up to this because somebody told me very beautifully that, printmaking, a print is not, it's not an image, it's a memory of an image. So I like that idea very much. It excited me that, so then I start, it provides me creative fodder. Okay. This is I'm coming to another body of work. It was called Necklace of Echoes. And Necklace of Echoes had, all the images had things going around the head. When I say things going, I mean, it was about uh, a certain, uh, it was creating enclosures at the same time, sometimes about being trapped, sometimes about, anyway, let's look at them. That was bird, and this is, it's called a necklace, a finger necklace, which uh, it's about the story of Angulimal, yes, sorry. So Angulimal's necklace. Next. This is a necklace for Sophie Calle. Sophie Calle is a French artist, and at that time she made a work in which her lover leaves her, and he writes her an email saying that she's been um, rejected, so to say. So then she made a work of art where she asked different people to respond to this. So she asked lawyers, she asked a grammar teacher, she asked a gym instructor, she asked all kinds of people to respond to that email. What would they do? So for instance, the lawyer tries to give her legal advice on it, or the grammar teacher finds errors with it, or I'm just giving you the more obvious examples, but it was interesting. And so at that time, just at that time, I was working on Necklace for Echoes, and I just made a paper necklace where you can destroy it but keep it, the that email. Next. Next. I did a series of small watercolors. They were called Walled City, but they are continuing the same mode, about an enclosure. Next. 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 Okay. Um, this is a series of works which is called Face Off after Kuniyoshi, and I would say that the next few paintings are basically who I am and what I do, and it is again the artist in the studio. And I've always felt that I've said it sometimes that painting is a martial art for me. It's like it's absolutely it's about rigor. It's about integrity. It's about giving. It's about life and death, and I'm going to give it all I have. And it sounds so funny. You don't really, but anyway. Uh, so it's that the samurai code, which is it's amazing. It's uh, and of course, I came to the samurai code much later. This is just in reading or something. But what really excited me and interested me was this. I'd seen many images of Kuniyoshi, a 19th century Japanese printmaker master, and he's done a whole series of these samurai and action figures, people with swords and costume and everything. And for a couple of years, whenever I would see it, I would just see the artist in the studio in it. I kind of identified, and it's about action and anxiety and uh, great theater, which so in this exhibition, and then for many years after, I've been using Kuniyoshi's figures, and I plant them in the studio, and they seem to be doing what I feel is normal, is what all of us do. But anyway, next. Next. Paper Storm. The figure on the easel is it's a reference to Maurizio Catalan, who's a Spanish artist, and he did an performance once many years ago where um somebody put a cork in his mouth, and that's it, nothing. It's about silence, about not speaking, and so this is kind of a, I would say it's a private joke. It's like all those moments when, in spite of all the battles you fight, your painting doesn't speak, as they say. As it's like it doesn't comply to what you wish, and this is it's it's called Quarrel Duet, and um, yeah, I think it's kind of a I like to paint these. It's a kind of dance of incomprehension. The artist doesn't know, and so you paint that not knowing. That the figure on the inside the painting is actually it's a Turkish dervish, and I drew it because I like the choreography of the twisted fabric and the arms, and I also felt that his arms and his head looked like Picasso, so it seemed appropriate to appropriate this. Next. This is a 8 feet horizontal work, and it's just fighting the devils in the studio. Next. Arachne is, I mean, again, it's a Greek character, and I was fascinated by the idea that she was kind of damned to weave forever, and uh, but I felt this sort of, it had an association um, of hard work and creativity. So I kind of identified with that whole spirit. Next, Judgment Day. Taking from the biblical themes of next, Utamaro's Promise. This is a kind of homage to Utamaro's, a Japanese artist I like very much. This, this bird is comes from, the motif comes from his art. Next, this this is a mural that I did for a private house, and um, it's about 16 feet across, and I'm trying to remember the name actually, but I can't. The Rose Quartet. Yeah. The alternate panels are, it's embroidery on fabric, and 1 and 3 are watercolor on paper. Next, this is Pink Scream. This is, I mean, as you have seen, I've had a very kind of singular kind of journey, and uh, obsessive, almost doing the same thing as if again and again. So, so this almost depicts that emotion of, oh, not again. It's like the self springs up every time, and uh, thinking along those lines, I next please. Uh, in 2013, I did an exhibition. This was called Room for Erasures, and no, it was really, uh, at that point, it was really bothering me that I was working with this self image obsessively again and again. That's all I could do. I mean, friends would advise me to go and, you know, say to paint the landscape or to paint flowers, or all kinds of things which were, and I can also say I attempted maybe at different times, but nothing seemed to work. And I would always, after a brief period of ooh and ah and trying or doing something, I would revert again to all that you saw. And so I kind of, at that point, I did something like this, which I thought might help. It seemed like drastic and almost ritualistic, but I thought that it could be a good exercise in self improvement. And so I did these three drawings, pencil drawings, which I wanted to do anyway. I wanted to do large pencil drawings, so they were kind of, it's 8 feet by 5 feet, and I wanted to attempt this uh, drawing with pencil on a large scale, and I made them sincerely, and the whole idea was that later I would take them to the gallery, and next, and I would give them to my viewer to erase. So the idea was, maybe that whole making and erasing would, I don't know, some sort of a cleansing. I was attempting a cleansing, which it would give me a fresh start, or it would stir up something, shake me up and make me do other things. So it was devised like this. There were these ladders where you can climb and erase the upper side, and yeah, and there were these stands, like, in churches you have those candle stands, so they were for the erasers, and uh, they were sharp and pointy, and the erasers were beautiful. And it was like opening myself to the viewer. It was about intimacy, because why would I let somebody touch a work of art? But I wanted that, and it also was like a test for me, how I would take this whole thing. And Uh, so this is what, I think you're seeing it erased, well, partially erased. Next. So the viewers were invited to erase these drawings, and some of them did willingly and logically that the artist has asked and we must, and some refused because they thought it was. Uh, some people thought it was gimmicky and unnecessary, and somebody thought it was violent and it shouldn't be done, and the drawing should be. So there were all kinds of reactions, and while doing this, I mean, it was a great interaction because I came up with so many different reactions. There were some people who were like wildly happy to erase, and their whole pleasure, like three people climbing on one ladder and erasing. It was like, it was shocking. It was like, so all that can happen to you if you open yourself to the world, So I mean, this is nothing, I know, but at the same time, I thought of uh, many things. I thought of Hussein, and I thought of all kinds of. Uh, I don't remember the word right now, but the possibilities of violence that an image can be exposed to, and I mean, not just censorship, but a physical wiping out. I mean, all that can happen and has happened. And I mean, these were just small drawings. It was a personal project, but I thought about all that when it happened. And next, next. Yeah, the original drawing. And next, yeah, you see the erased one. Next, the original and the erased. So the show was on for about 3 weeks, and they were pretty gone by the end. And next, next. And so many people ask me then if that was a project to change your work, to change your itinerary. So was it successful? So did you change at all? So I didn't change at all. And I mean, uh, it's maybe it's asking for too much, but I think it was a useful. It was a useful exercise, and it provided a sense of distance, as if I could, as if see what it was all about. And but I think finally we have to work with our limitations. So I return to being who I am. I cannot change, I suppose. And soon after, I guess I took the idea of erasure in a different way, and maybe literally. And I was also invited to an exhibition which had to do with death. So I did some paintings which have to do with death. Death dress, the previous one. Next. This image is after Hans Baldung Green. It's Death and the Maiden, which, so she's the artist. Next, next. This is a dead self, I imagined. Next. This is called The Dance of the Pink Pavilions, and it's a fairly recent work. And I was just exploring this. I mean, the idea of the pencil piercing me through, and it's next. This Untitled Red is, it's, I haven't painted too many, I would say, bloody images, or I think maybe maybe it has to do with what's going on around us, and you know it does affect your studio life and you think about it, so maybe it has to do with that. But the violence outside. And next. Next. Now I'll just quickly share images of the last exhibition I did in Delhi. It was at the Bikaner House, and um, so there were some watercolors and there were some drawings on fabric. So these were drawings on small mattresses. Next. Next. These were shaped mattresses, and I'll show you images soon. Next. Next. So this is one of the paintings I did, and the show was called "The Air is a Mill of Hooks," and again the title comes from Sylvia Plath, and the title came much later after a lot of the work was done, and I found that again and again I seemed to be uh, it seemed to be about unease. There was nothing, nothing seemed comfortable, and so the title seemed appropriate. Some people thought it had to do with the Delhi pollution, but that's not. Anyway, and I was invited to this space, and it seemed very complicated. So in my mind, I simplified it, and I thought that I wanted to do these shaped mattresses there, and simply because I've worked with painted mattress earlier, and I thought the in that large space that physical presence would work, and when I said shaped, I thought also I wanted that to start with that minimal, almost modernist form. The geometry, the circle, the L shape, the rectangle, and to make it very simple, and then I would impose on it as if, and and I found myself also. Let me share that my process is very intuitive. I'm not a big strategist, so almost like a few months before the show opens, and if you ask me what am I doing, I can't tell because my painting tells me. It's very it's kind of on the spot thinking, and the images spring from there, and it's very difficult, but at the same time it's what my painting gives me, I accept and I receive and I push it. So that's how it works, and I found myself painting a lot of figures with books, and agitated people hiding behind furniture or clutching onto books, and I don't like to define it, but at the same time I think there was, what I was clear about was there's uh, unease is just the right word, but uh, perhaps it also has to do this with this whole again the atmosphere of disrespect towards things that I value, uh, culture and the end of books. Uh, apart from book burning in Timbuktu and censorship and all that, but also a certain, um, there are certain things that one values and holds precious, which you are not sure. That there's this whole anxiety about things changing, and I found that happening in my work, and I will not say that was my intention, but that's what my images seem to tell me. So next. Next. I chose this fabric. It's acrylic on fabric, and I chose it because somehow the Art Deco reminds me of Bombay. Next. This was it was something which I had not done before. It's a fabric collage. So there are the whole thing is fabric. The red panel you see is a printed. It's an Indonesian red batik print, and the other three panels, they are charcoal and watercolor on uh, unbleached cotton. So it's just what they call mother part in Bombay. It's so there are three drawings and that fabric panel, and that's assembled together on one large panel. So it's 5 feet by 8 feet. Next. Again, it's a similar mode. It's uh, the fabric you see on top is a print. Then you see a screen print on top, and then it's charcoal and watercolor on fabric below. So there are 4 panels which are joined together, and it's called Spellbound. The costume comes from a Hitchcock film where Dali designed the costume for a certain dream sequence, and um, but I like the idea very much that there's an arrow which is not quite pierced, but it's on the verge, and that Renaissance like panel on top, it's as if all the European art, the great European art that I've seen, um, and I'm on that side of the wall, uh, which appreciates that art, but oh, it sounds banal talking about it like that. But anyway, next. These were small drawings on fabric stretched on. They were small mattresses, really. So charcoal and watercolor on the structure behind the head is. It comes from a Balenciaga collar, which it's a very famous dress that Audrey Hepburn wore. So I was thinking, if you have such a large collar, all that you can carry inside. Next. Again, charcoal on fabric, which is on a mattress. Next. This when I started on earlier also, that means in 1990, I'd done lots of um, figures with as if with domestic appliances, a lamp or a, a stove making tea and things like that. So I think it's going back, this one, the girl with the toaster. Next. Bedroom with 2 squares. And what was interesting was because it was on a mattress, so the drawing curves, and like at the bottom, you almost feel the bedness of it. It's like a bed, the weight. Next, this is called Visitation, and it's art. The image visiting the artist. That's it. I think done. Yeah. Thank you.
At the Beacon House, little postcards and photographs. I would like to know a little bit more about those pictures. And I mean, I could see some of them were maybe from the museums.
Yeah, I'll tell
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Actually, what I'm showing today is, yeah, it's a very edited version because I left out those. They are the digital prints that you're talking about. I left out the collages. I left out many things because then it becomes too much to. But those digital prints are they work in a pair. So the image on the left is a photograph, actual photograph of myself in situations, and the image on the right is they are my own drawings which are stained or reworked, and then they are digitally printed. So it's the whole process is manual, but what you finally see is a digital print. So and they are framed in those stained mounts, so stained, which I haven't shown them.
Hi, my question is about those three paintings with erasers.
I wanted to know how, because they reminded me of, I forget the name of the artist, performance artist who sits and allows the people to come and
Correct.
tear.
Correct.
Marina,
Marina
yeah, yeah.
Abramovich. Correct.
So, as a viewer, when you
No, that's
watch
not
the.
Marina. That's Yoko Ono.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
she's talking about, okay.
She said some.
Very difficult. Very difficult. Yoko
People
Ono.
are allowed to go and cut
Ah,
some
that's
part of the
Yoko
costume.
Ono.
Yeah, whoever it is. Now, as a viewer, when you see that performance, there is tension, right?
Yes.
And in this process, when you saw people doing it, actually, and I'm sure every day there will be some variation.
Yeah.
And you said the whole process of creativity when you enter the painting, when start is a torture, it's violent, you said.
Yeah.
So when it actually happened, what was the feeling you got, and did those images came back to you? Like, okay, viewers, they came and some were very thrilled to erase, some were very hesitant. But as an artist, when what was the process while the entire thing happened, and after that was over, did you go back to those images and how it changed, if at all they did?
Yeah, actually,
Thank you.
because there was a very clear decision made on my part that these drawings are going to be for erasure. So it's I was prepared for the worst, but so it wasn't that it was heartbreaking or anything. It was not, because I kind of I was prepared for it, and also I think it was like it was almost an experiment, because the drawing had to be good, it had to work in a certain way, I had to use the right I mean, it just had to work as a drawing first. So that's a difficulty. Then it's after that's done, then okay, you're going to erase it. And so so then I just planned to be, I think, to observe. And then all that happened in front of me, all the erasures, as I so and then had not gone back to those images, no. Yeah. No, I think uh, at some point I have experienced it, but no more. But I mean, if you're actually asking as a question, but when I came to the mattresses, there was a whole list of things which I thought can one, as subject matter, one can associate with a bed. So, when I started painting on the mattresses, I needed that list, in the sense that I needed some logical reason to be painting on them. That, okay, so this is about a couple, or this is about not sleeping, or this is about sleeping or dreaming. So it seemed logical. Otherwise, why are you doing this? I would ask myself, and they didn't see. But it's only after I did a couple, I did about, say, 7, and then I felt liberated. Then it was just an object or a surface, and after that point, I didn't need a reason. I could do anything on it, and I don't care whether, because the third person needs a reason, but I don't, because I've already been through this.
Um, you often talk about stories, like the story. Actually, they're fables, you know, and it's fascinating, absolutely fascinating, because it's a kind of all through your oeuvre. Um, you are addressing fables,
What is the difference?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to figure it. Uh, a story is a narration, A fable has something, if you extend the word again, you say fabulous,
Uh-huh.
you know. There's something fabulous about your work.
Wow.
Not certain in the sense, like, no, in everyday speech we say, wow, fabulous. But that's, of course, they are fabulous. But they are fabulous in, in the sense that they address fables. Fables are, I suppose, stories which are deeply ingrained in us. And they are uh, they are lessons, uh, they are explications, They address deep areas of the mind, you know, monsters and dragons and princesses and kings. Uh, so it's a wonderful. I mean, it's wonderful to see this whole range today, and this thought suddenly came up to me that although I've been seeing your work for years, this idea of the fabulousness of the work came to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would really appreciate if you elaborate a little on one particular painting where her face was, I think it was some jewels or some.
The jewels, yeah.
Yeah. And you also mentioned something about leukoderma. So does that
Yes.
have any reference or any
Yeah,
significance?
that's right.
Thank you.
I had leukoderma, and at that point I had a patchy leukoderma, so it did play on my mind. And of course, I'm not. There have been works where I've specifically worked with that, but I haven't shown you that. But when I did the Palace show at that point, I came across this image of Alexander McQueen, where apart from all the costume and everything, the makeup had to do with some jewel-like thing on the face, and I thought that was fascinating because uh, I always wanted a reason to. I mean, that painting is called Changing Skin, and so it has to do with many things. One is that this idea of the maps on the face, and because I had leukoderma, which was a changing leukoderma, so these maps keep changing, and that the idea that skin should change is fascinating. It doesn't change for everybody. You wake up, at the your tone maybe, but otherwise skin doesn't change. For me, it changed every day for about 10 years, constantly. So I found this very fascinating, but I could not bring it into my art. So whenever I got a chance to, it would in this way. So this was one way in which I had these jewels on the face, and the jewels are also, they look like pomegranate seeds. They also look like moons, and they also reminded me of this very obvious thing that I had on my face, which I did not talk about. So it's called Changing Skin.
I'm not 100% sure, but the 11th slide had a bird which looked like a crane with a face and golden patches. Could you I really like that picture. Could you
Yeah.
elaborate on that one?
Yeah, it was actually, again, since we are talking about it, so the patches on the face again had to do with leukoderma, which yeah, so it was a reference to that, and the idea of like the forehead had this figure and flying birds, and uh, actually thoughts, this racing activity inside us.
And like the dark and light, were they to denote a phase in
No,
life or
no,
just
it was actually, it's a visual device. When you're working with charcoal, at some stage your painting becomes muddy or dark, and then you want to bring light into it. So you use lemon yellow. It was that simple.
okay? Thank you.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know if you showed the panic. Sorry, I don't know if you showed the panic room. Your painting. I'm not sure, but you in.
No.
Do you? I mean, can I ask you a question on that? So the Panic Room has you talk about it, a Spanish filmmaker,
Right.
and you talk about him being an ambassador of freedom and psychological liberation. You said. So, what according to you is psychological liberation, or why did you decide to paint it or draw it?
Okay, I don't remember
This is-
using these exact words, but
Oh,
but uh, uh, but I could explain that painting was a portrait of
you're
Buñuel.
in the shadow.
Yeah, Buñuel, and in the corner there is a kind of acrobat, playing with balls, and I had just recently seen a couple of Buñuel films, and of course, apart from there's a great creative freedom, and there is also uh, sometimes the way he uses the absurd. I mean, all of us probably know this, but it's really kicks the hell out of meaning. There's no meaning, as if you're allowed to work without meaning, without being uh, it's also very he, as a Catholic, frees himself from religion or religious practice. That's a lot that Buñuel does. uh, it may not be my concern, but at the same time, this whole idea of freedom, you know, he really kind of really, you can say, he turns the volume on, you know, I felt. And uh, and you go to different stages in life, and I felt at that point I just needed that. And I also had in that painting figure from Goya, which with a gown, and there are two children kind of pulling at that gown. So it's from a Goya painting, and that detail, you could say it is. Yeah. So this whole, I think this, I think I do it in all my work, or often, that this playing between domesticity and the desire for the heroic. So there is that, there's regular life. There is a lamp and a chair and a table and things to do, and the toaster. But there is that whole desire for the heroic. Like in Sylvia Plath, I used her words. She says that I don't want a black box. I want a sarcophagus. So it's like, I mean, it's a line from poem. It's that you don't want a regular death. You want a heroic death. So forget death, but I'm talking about this whole thing about you want to elevate yourself from the mundane, and that desire, I think, is there in many of the images.
I have a question. Those stains in your watercolors, I don't know. I saw certain human figurines, but then what was your intention in creating those stains in the background? Were they to add texture to your foregrounds, or were they to, balance them out in a way? What was that thought of creating those stains?
There are a whole range of stains. So some stains are actually to create, like you say, background or wall, or they're actually doing something there. And there are some stains which are unintentional. So that is the when the water behaves in a certain way, which are my favorite stains, because it means I get a surprise. And then there is a third stain. I would say maybe that because you know the nature of water, and then you try to manipulate it, and so in the later works with fabric, the way fabric absorbs and makes stains, or the way it pales, or the way it creates an edge. So all these are abstract things which I like, and I try to push.
And the acceptance of anxiety. I mean, where you put it into your work, when you just said that I took that anxiety and I put it into my work. I mean, was it a let's say a eureka moment for you, or was it over the years a process of you accepting it and fighting it with your work, or creating it, or depicting it? When did that take place? After JJ, or when you started?
I I think it was just organic. It just happened as a matter of, you don't decide and do something. So then, um, so like I can stand back, we're looking at about 25 years work. So I can say that it seems like that. And I might say something else after a few years, It's,
We'll ask you that question after.
With that, then we come to the end of this evening's Mumbai Local session with Anju Dodiya. Thank you so much, ma'am, for this
Thank you.
wonderful session.
Thank you all of you for coming.